I'm Christy Smythe with the Business of Business. I'm here talking to Seema Khinda Johnson about her startup Nuggets, which is a fascinating company she started with her husband. Seema, I would love to start by asking you about Nuggets and just kind of explaining how it works, because it sounds really cool.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. So yeah, Nuggets, set up Nuggets, I think late 2016 after my husband had his credit card used fraudulently online, and that incredibly frustrating process, right, of having to cancel your cards, not knowing where your information was compromised, whether it was at a shop, over the phone or online. And we just realized there needed to be a better way, essentially, and, you know, the control of personal information in our everyday interactions, whether we were buying something or we were logging on. So so Alastair and I set up Nuggets. It's all around taking back control of your data as an end user, but also enabling businesses to better protect their customer data. And we've built a self-sovereign ID and payment platform that allows them to do exactly that.
Right. So I think I've seen it written that it's based on the blockchain, right?
That's right.
How exactly? Because it sounds great. Like, I mean, you save all your stuff on blockchain, and then you have some kind of key. But how is it really supposed to work? Is that
that's a great question. Let me just explain how the product works.
Yeah.
So we are essentially a B2B2C business. So businesses like financial services, insurance companies, telcos, logistics organizations white label our platform. They integrate our product within their existing apps and services. And so what happens is a user would actually take a picture of a government issued ID, they would do a moving selfie, and then they would upload a payment card. And what we do is that we encrypt all that data. It's componentized into bits of nuggets because we like to share the minimum amount of information required to carry out a particular transaction. We don't save anything on your mobile device, but we actually save your data in something called IPFS, which is decentralized storage. We really love the name of this product. I think it's something like interplanetary file system. And then what we do is we use the blockchain because it's an immutable ledger. We don't save any of that personal data on the blockchain, but we save a hash, which is essentially a location of where that data is saved in IPFS. So hopefully you're still with me as I explained that. But we use the blockchain. Yeah, we use the blockchain in a particular way, but we never save any PII, which is personal information, on the blockchain, because as you can imagine, there's lots of regulations. Also in the States, in the Europe, we have GDPR, which means that end users have the right to be forgotten. So you can imagine if you save anything like that on the blockchain, one, there's the transparency there, and we need to make sure we use as private, but we also need to make sure that they've got the right to be forgotten. And that's the same as well with CCPA in California.
Yeah, that is a lot of different things to juggle in this whole concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's really key is that it's interesting you talked about blockchain then, because we hardly talk about the use of blockchain in our solution, because I think Alastair and I, when we were coming at this problem around personal data, privacy, sharing the minimum amount of information and all of those sorts of things, we didn't actually go into this thinking, what can we do with the blockchain? We were actually trying to solve this problem. And then we read about the blockchain and we thought, oh my gosh, it gives us all of these components, but it isn't the entire solution. So I think that's really key to say that, that Nuggets came at this problem first versus looking at the technology and going, what can we do with blockchain? It just really brilliantly lends itself to the problem that we're solving.
Interesting. That's cool. From looking into this problem so far, we know passwords and the way we do things now, everybody knows it's terrible. There's been there's hacking and data breaches. People don't remember their passwords. We know. And why do you think it's taken so long for this kind of a solution to be developed? What are the roadblocks?
Yeah, no, that's a really brilliant question, and one that we ask ourselves all the time, right? I think we'll look back at this time, we'll look back at this last 20 years. I couldn't tell you when passwords were invented. I should probably know that. But essentially, we rely currently on the end user to better protect their data. But actually, what we need to be doing is building intuitive, thoughtful products that make it almost impossible for the end user or a business to be compromised. We shouldn't have to be teaching users, please change your password, every month, use a password manager, do this, have unique, don't share credentials and all of those sorts of things. But the reality is the system isn't fit for purpose. And we know, we've seen all the data breaches, we've seen all the fraud, but essentially this way of keeping data in this centralized way, protected or have root level access, protected by, passwords, it's not fit for purpose. And I think really what's happened is I don't think Nuggets is unique to have come up with, we need to get rid of passwords. I think that's widely accepted. But I think lots of things needed to happen for a solution to be accepted. And a couple of them I'll talk to you about. One is, we really do believe that, data is in a critical state right now, regardless of the money that has been spent and the funds that are spent on cybersecurity and fraud prevention. The data breaches are on the rise. Fraud is on the rise, payment fraud, identity fraud. Also, I would say consumer sentiment has really shifted, and that's just been accelerated by the pandemic. Look, you and I are doing so much more in a contactless way, right? People are consuming community services, having doctor's appointments online. These are things that we just were not doing a few years back. So it's really accelerated that adoption of technology. And so privacy has become almost of paramount. It's the number one priority essentially when consumers look to consume goods and services online. And also regulation's tougher. And there's been technological advances, I would say, with things like the blockchain or distributed, decentralized type technologies that make having an individual, the owner of their data. And I would say it almost needed to be the convergence of all of those things for the solution to come together, because the technology might have been there, but the consumer sentiment wasn't. Or, the data wasn't in a critical state and all of those sorts of things. So I think it's widely accepted that passwords aren't fit for purpose. It's just the whole environment right now is almost like, it's come to a point where it's almost like the perfect storm.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone's online and everyone's realizing, wait, and organic solutions are there.
Yeah.
So can you kind of explain a little bit about where the company is now in terms of growth, and are people using this, or are merchants using this?
Yeah, brilliant question. So I think that's a great question. We started, Alastair and I spent a long time in tech, and when we came together to set up Nuggets, we started building the platform. Obviously, it was a nascent technology. We were utilizing blockchain. Late 2017, we released a version of the platform for the FCA sandbox. The FCA is the UK regulator here. It's the Financial Conduct Authority. Mm-hmm. So we tested an early version of the platform. It was iOS, but all executing in the blockchain with over 1,000 consumers and a global payment service provider. And then in late 2000, I'm trying to remember the dates, late 2018, we released alphas globally. So we had over something like 40,000 individuals download the product, test the product, for its resilience, try to break it. And then in May of last year, we launched in the whole production level platform across the Europe, and late last year, we launched in Australia as well. So we've already, the platform's being used by a number of global payment service providers. We're also integrating with a number of financial services and logistics companies. So yeah, I feel like we're sort of on our way now for that commercialization of the platform.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. Is there any chance it's coming to the US at all?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I mean, it's a perfect time for us to be in the US. Obviously, we don't want to run before we can walk because, we just want to make sure that everything's almost like aligned in Europe before we do that. But the US for us is a huge market, and we've already started to explore commercial relationships with a number of US-based organizations. And that's been driven largely by the consumer sentiment around privacy. You will know someone that's had their identity, compromised. It's actually rife in the US, and actually a large proportion of US citizens are actively seeking ways to better protect their data. And there's a real absence in the market for a solution. There's an opportunity there for a product like Nuggets, and also innovations being driven by CCPA, which is the regulation around data. So we've had initial discussions. So I think really the US for us is a huge market and one that we'll look to expand to next year.
Cool, exciting.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about your background as well as Alastair's background and how that led to where you are now?
Yeah, so I suppose it's quite unique. I mean, there's lots of other businesses that are founded by husbands and wives. So I started my background as a project manager, used to work for a large American, actually, digital agency and just worked my way up, working on bigger and more complex programs, essentially. And then I found myself at Skype, where I headed up go-to-market globally for them. And then after the Microsoft acquisition, headed up go-to-market there as well. So I had a lot of experience in commercializing and operationalizing products and launching them within markets. And Alice, so I think that was over 20 years. I keep saying 20 years, but I'm sure it's a bit over that now. And then Alastair's background has been in tech. He's been in tech for over 25 years. And actually, prior to setting up Nuggets, was also working at Skype and at Microsoft, had his own tech business for some time. But he's more on the strategic and on the technical side. So when Alastair had come up with, we really need to solve this problem, it was one of those things where I think we were a bit bonkers, really, because, setting up a business together, with young children, with bills and all of those sorts of things that we all struggle with. And we just both looked at each other and went, we need to do this together because we both do entirely different things. We started the journey about 4 years ago. And it's going great. So I think there's because we've worked at organisations before, Christy, I think it was a lot easier for us to fit into Nuggets without going, this is the first time we've worked together. The only problem with it is, though, it's knowing when to stop talking shop. We've had to come up with some real rules around, especially during the pandemic, right, where you're working from home and you're living at home and you're bringing up children. We've almost had to create the do's and don'ts, when we can talk about Nuggets and when we can't.
That is fascinating. Yeah, I imagine that is a challenge that many teams who are life partners have. Right. Kind of a labor of love, I guess. Protecting.
Yeah, no, exactly. We're all in.
Yeah. I hate that I have to keep asking this question, or this question keeps coming up about women in fintech, but it is an area where you don't see a lot of women. Have you encountered any difficulties related to that? And if so, how have you pushed back or dealt with that?
Yeah,
being a woman in this space,
and it is a shame that we have to talk about all of this, but this is exactly the forum in which we need to shine a light on really the disparity between those that get funded and those that don't. And I think it is tough. There is no denying it's really hard to raise money. It's really hard to carve out a career, and incredibly, especially in tech, male-dominated environment. There's been typically roles that women would take up, whether they're marketing or PR versus the tech side, or setting up their own organisation, because just the stakes are, again, it's too high in raising the cash. Unfortunately, the stats are the stats, right? I think, the UK is not much behind the US, and Europe. I think it's something like 2% of female-founded organisation get funding from VCs. So it is VC. And what tough about that, it obviously is network as well. So it could be the person that you're sitting in front of might be male. You know, it's very, I mean, I've been incredibly fortunate. We have been funded by a women-led angel investment network as well. So I feel incredibly fortunate that there are women on our cap table as well as men. So, and I think that's key as well. So I think one, its access to funding is just tougher. Its network is tougher. Normally we're sitting opposite someone that's been to a particular school. Normally it's a white male. And, you know, you can't get around from the fact that they like to fund people that they can see a pattern in. But, you know, other founders that have been successful before, maybe this is their second startup. So it is just harder to get in the door with the warm introductions. There's loads of reasons why. But, you know, I've said this before, I am really hopeful. I'm hopeful that I really feel that the tide's turning. And, you know, with discussions like this and wider discussion as well, I really think, you know, diversity is a huge, huge thing. And not only is it good, it's incredibly good for business. I mean, all the data's there. Diverse teams and female-founded organisations outperform those that aren't. So I think given that, there will be pressure on those investors that only fund, you know, a particular type of founder. On why are we not founding? And I really think they'll become irrelevant because, you know, despite it being tougher, women are still doing it when they do get funded, outperform, and diverse teams outperform. And the other thing is, I read an article the other week, or a few months back, I think it was, I can't remember the source, but it was all around a third of the world's wealth will be managed by women in the not so distant future, which means that, you know, that's an incredibly exciting prospect, that given all the challenges, we will be managing a considerable amount of the world's resource. And because of that, I'm hoping that there will be more women across the table making those funding decisions.
Yeah, that would be definitely a major shift. That would definitely be interesting to watch. Yeah, and Bill, and you clearly know your stuff. You've gotten into this area. You focused on this very huge problem. So I'm sure that also helps. But what do you think, just from what you've learned so far, like what is like the sea change, or what will it take for us to break our bad password habits and, you know, for our data to be much more secure?
Yeah, brilliant question. You know, and this is one that we grapple with all the time when we think about, you know, what vertical should we be targeting? You know, where will we get the quickest deal over the line?
Right.
I think what's tough is the fact that it will need large financial organizations to get behind self-sovereign identity. You know, they today are our most trusted custodians of our data. And I really think they will play a huge role in self-sovereign identity and being able to enable you and I to be able to take back control of our data. So I don't think this is going to be a product that only the end user downloads and makes the decision. I think actually financial services will play a huge role in this. And I think, you know, what's exciting about that is that distributed and decentralized technologies are bringing great advantages. And actually, what's in it for the banks then? So I think, you know, what's in it for the banks is the thing with self-sovereign identity is it will bring products faster to market, operational efficiency, reduce fraud. So there is so much in it for the organizations that will enable it. I think it will be hard to ignore, but it does need those stars to align, essentially.
Right. That kind of buy-in makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for talking about all of this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you for having me.